Sometime in the next, I'd say 24 months or so, an artificial intelligence system is going to autonomously negotiate, draft, and digitally sign a $5 million procurement contract for raw steel.
Yeah.
And it will do this entirely without a single human being reading the final terms, without a human signing the check.
Which is a very sobering thought for most people.
Right, it really is. So if you are listening to this and you're still thinking of AI as, that polite little chatbot on your screen that you use to summarize an afternoon meeting,
Right.
we really need to completely reset your expectations today, because that era of clever parlor tricks, that is officially dead.
It is entirely in the rearview mirror.
Yeah.
What we're dealing with now, you see, is not a conversation partner. It's a full-blown operational engine.
Exactly. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are opening up an incredibly insightful piece of source material. It's Manoj Gopalapalli's weekly AI Pulse newsletter.
The May 11th, 2026 edition specifically.
Yes, exactly. And our mission for you today is to really unpack this massive tectonic shift happening across the tech ecosystem. We are looking at why the global AI race is no longer about, who has the smartest standalone model.
Because that race is basically over.
Right. It's now about who can build the most robust physical infrastructure and, crucially, who can govern it safely.
You see, this is the fundamental transition you really have to grasp. We are moving away from AI as a productivity layer, like copilots and assistants.
Yeah.
We are now looking at an operational execution layer. The industry has stopped asking, hey, can this model pass the bar exam? The question now is, can we operationalize this intelligence economically across global supply chains without the whole system breaking down?
Which is a huge leap. And for you listening right now, whether you are in logistics or finance or software, this deep dive is going to fundamentally challenge your baseline assumptions about the next few years of your career. So let's get right into the ground reality. To understand where we are going, we really need to define what we are leaving behind. The shift from brains to brawn. Gopanapalli points out in the newsletter that the frontier of AI is no longer benchmark performance. It's relentless execution.
Which is a very, very necessary correction for the industry. I mean, for the last few years, we saw a sort of digital jugad.
Oh, that's the perfect word for it, jugad.
Right. You had developers literally taping together APIs, pasting text into a prompt box, crossing their fingers, and just hoping the model wouldn't hallucinate.
Right, it's very hacky.
It was entirely an experimental mindset. But let's be very clear about this. You cannot run a Fortune 500 company on jugad. The shift to brawn means moving from these standalone research releases to massive infrastructure scale deployment.
Right, and the newsletter gives a really concrete example of this with ServiceNow. They are basically targeting over $30 billion in subscription revenue by 2030, purely through deep AI integration.
Which is staggering.
It is. And they aren't just, slapping a chat widget onto their dashboard anymore. They're attempting to turn enterprise software into a literal AI operating system.
Yeah.
Or take Cursor. They just launched a TypeScript SDK. Now, for the non-engineers listening to us, an SDK is a software development kit. But break this down for us. What does giving an AI its own SDK actually change in the real world?
I will tell you exactly what it changes. Previously, you would ask an AI to write a piece of code, right?
Yeah.
You'd copy it, you would manually paste it into your system, and you would test it.
Yeah.
The AI was essentially a brain in a jar.
Smart, but no hands.
Exactly. It had no hands.
Yep.
A TypeScript SDK essentially gives the AI an API hand. It can reach out, write the code, deploy it into the environment, test it autonomously, see if it fails, rewrite it, and push it live.
Wow.
The developer environment becomes a programmable agent ecosystem. The AI is no longer your assistant. It is the active developer.
But let me push back on this a bit, because if we look at those early language models, I always thought of them like a brilliantly smart but completely inexperienced intern.
Okay.
Like they give you fantastic brainstorming ideas, but you wouldn't hand them the keys to your factory. Now you were saying AI is becoming the seasoned operations manager.
Right.
But if intelligence is what makes it an AI in the first place, and eventually, every company has access to these same incredibly smart models from OpenAI or Anthropic, doesn't the magic just disappear? Doesn't the competitive advantage vanish?
You are looking at it purely from the lens of raw intelligence, which is exactly the trap most executives are falling into right now.
Oh, really?
Yes, the raw intelligence is already commoditized. The true competitive moat today is not how smart your model is. Everyone has a smart model. The moat is persistent reasoning, memory, and multi-agent coordination.
Okay, wait. Break that down for me. What does persistent reasoning actually look like in practice?
It means the system wakes up today, remembers the specific bottleneck it encountered in your supply chain yesterday,
Okay.
coordinates with, say, 3 other specialized AI systems, maybe the inventory agent, the logistics agent, and the finance agent,
Right.
and it executes a workaround without you ever prompting it. Intelligence without execution is just potential. Execution is what actually moves the needle in an enterprise. The magic isn't the engine anymore, it's the transmission and the wheels.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. Okay, so if execution is the new game and you need the transmission and the wheels, that requires physical roads. You need heavy infrastructure.
Massive infrastructure.
And the numbers Gopanapali highlights in the newsletter are just staggering. Anthropic has committed over $200 billion.
$200 billion.
Yeah, $200 billion toward Google Cloud infrastructure and AI chips. And they aren't even stopping there. They are expanding this strategy via a SpaceX partnership, joining this ecosystem with Broadcom, Microsoft, NVIDIA, and Amazon.
Because, you see, software has finally hit the physical limit of the hardware.
But why SpaceX? I mean, what is the actual mechanism connecting a language model company to a rocket and satellite manufacturer?
It comes down to something called distributed inference and latency.
Latency, right?
If your autonomous AI is running, say, a deep-sea oil rig or an agricultural fleet in rural Punjab,
Yeah.
you cannot afford the time it takes to send data all the way back to a giant server farm in California, process it, and send the instruction back. Distributed inference means the AI's processing power isn't centralized anymore.
It's spread out.
Exactly. It is fragmented and processing across thousands of smaller chips locally. Or in this case, utilizing low Earth orbit satellite compute. You are literally pushing the brain closer to the physical operation.
That makes a lot of sense. And speaking of physical operations, the newsletter notes that Amazon is now opening its physical logistics network, the warehouses, trucks, routing systems, as an AI infrastructure platform for external businesses.
Transforming physical logistics into a platform, much like AWS did for cloud computing.
Right. And DeepMind's AlphaVolve is demonstrating real-world optimization across scientific computing.
It kind of reminds me of an Indian wedding.
An Indian wedding. Go on.
Yeah, look at it this way. You can hire the absolute best Michelin-starred caterer in the country. That caterer is your highly intelligent AI model.
Okay.
But if the wedding venue has no electricity, the roads are completely washed out so the trucks can't arrive and the tents blow away, that is your infrastructure. The food doesn't matter. The entire event is a disaster.
That is a very apt analogy.
But my concern here is the sheer scale. $200 billion. Are we basically seeing the global tech landscape being permanently carved up by 3 or 4 mega landlords? Like, if you don't own the venue, are you just tenant forever?
It is actually worse than just being a tenant. The ground reality is, if you do not possess long-term compute access, you cannot even play the game. Hardware-aware optimization is now the absolute core engineering discipline.
Wait, hardware-aware optimization? Yes. You cannot separate the software from the silicon anymore. The algorithms are being written specifically to exploit the physical layout of the chips they run on.
Oh, wow.
If a competitor has secured dedicated energy grids and advanced cooling centers, and you are just renting generic cloud space, they will out-execute you on every single metric.
Which brings a very heavy realization to the table, right? If AI requires dedicated power grids, satellite networks, and global logistics integration, it ceases to be just a software product.
Exactly.
Passive public works, like building the golden quadrilateral highway system. It becomes physical operational infrastructure.
Right.
And the moment something becomes physical infrastructure, it immediately becomes a matter of national security.
Precisely. And this is why we are seeing the massive rise of sovereign AI.
Right. The newsletter explicitly notes that the Pentagon has cleared several major tech firms to deploy AI systems across classified networks. AI is now officially classified as operational national infrastructure. And over in Europe, Mistral has emerged as the continent's AI sovereignty champion, proving that leadership is expanding way beyond Silicon Valley through these regional ecosystems focused on, openness and regulatory alignment. Even the frontier labs, Google, Microsoft, XAI, have all agreed to government testing before public release.
Because governments have finally woken up, they view AI as foundational for cybersecurity, intelligence, and basic national competitiveness.
But doesn't this kind of kill the dream? I mean, for decades, the utopian promise of the internet was this borderless, open, global village. Now this feels like the nuclear industry. or
That'd be
aviation.
regulated.
Yeah, highly regulated, siloed, deeply tied to national interests. If every region wants their own walled-off sovereign AI, don't we lose that global open internet momentum?
See, that borderless internet was a luxury of low-stakes data. When we were just sharing photos on Facebook and sending emails, borders didn't matter as much. But when an AI system controls a nation's power grid, or its healthcare logistics, or its classified military communications borders are mandatory, we are shifting to a multipolar future.
A multipolar future.
Yes, what sovereign AI does is prevent a single point of failure. If an undersea cable gets cut or a specific vendor goes offline, the traffic grid in Mumbai shouldn't collapse just because the central server was located in Virginia.
Right.
It is all about adversarial resilience.
Adversarial resilience. That is a great phrase. You build regional alliances rather than relying on one concentrated global provider. Okay, so we understand the heavy infrastructure and we understand the new geopolitical borders, but let's bring this all the way down to the boardroom.
Let's do it.
Because the friction point right now is how regular businesses actually buy and trust this technology. We are talking about procurement and financial auditing.
This is the actual bottleneck for enterprise adoption today.
Right, so Gopanapalli highlights that Anthropic is launching specialized AI agents specifically for financial services. They are focusing on reliability, compliance, explainability, and fraud detection.
Yes.
But there is this phenomenal insight he pulls from the newsletter's comments section. It's by a user named SourceMind AI.
Yes. That was a brilliant comment.
It really was. They pointed out that while vendors are aggressively pitching these agentic AI systems, the corporate buying criteria have not caught up at all. Buyers are evaluating these agents using old feature list frameworks.
Exactly, for mid-market ops.
Right. And they are completely ignoring how these autonomous workflows handle exceptions or failures or compliance edge cases.
Because they are basically trying to evaluate a self-driving car using the inspection checklist of a bicycle. It simply doesn't map.
It doesn't. And Bain & Company just released an analysis on intelligent procurement systems that are capable of autonomous sourcing and purchasing. This brings me right back to my opening point.
The steel contract.
Yes. It is one thing to let an AI draft a polite marketing email. If it hallucinates, a customer gets a strange email. Big deal. But if an AI autonomously negotiates a $5 million purchase order for factory equipment without a human signing the check...
Risk profile completely changes.
Completely. How on earth do corporate auditors sign off on that? Neural networks are famously black boxes. How do you audit a black box making financial decisions?
Well, the short answer is you cannot. And this is exactly the core architectural shift Gopanapalli emphasizes. Explainability is no longer a nice-to-have secondary compliance feature.
Right.
It is a mandatory core architectural requirement. The transition from a copilot, which just suggests an action to a human, to an autonomous agent, which executes the action itself, it rewrites the entire implementation risk profile.
So what is the technical workaround? Because you can't just tell an auditor, oh, well, the algorithm decided it was the best price. Trust us.
No, of course not. The workaround is what the industry is calling governance-aware orchestration.
Okay, unpack that for us. Governance-aware orchestration.
A standard large language model operates probabilistically, right?
Yeah.
It just guesses the next best token.
Yeah.
You cannot audit a guess. So developers are building strict, deterministic guardrails around the AI.
Okay.
Before the AI's API hand is allowed to execute that purchase order, the system forces the AI to output its exact chain of reasoning into an immutable audit log.
And an immutable log meaning a digital ledger that cannot be altered or deleted after the fact.
Correct. The auditor doesn't need to understand the neural weights of the AI model. The auditor simply looks at the log, which clearly states, I checked vendor A, the price was X. I checked vendor B, the price was Y. Vendor B's delivery timeline matched our factory schedule, so I executed the contract based on procurement rule 4.2.
Oh, I see. So there's total traceability.
Exactly. If a vendor cannot combine their advanced reasoning with that level of strict governance, controls, and traceability, enterprise adoption simply halts. The vendors who perfect the auditing layer will win the enterprise market.
That makes total sense. So looking at all these pieces on the board right now, the $200 billion infrastructure partnerships, the sovereign borders, the shift in procurement and auditing, what does the immediate roadmap look like? Where do we go in the next 2 years?
The newsletter paints a very clear 2-year horizon, and it centers entirely around optimization.
Right. It mentions Microsoft and AWS aggressively pushing persistent AI agents deeply into global supply chains. We are talking about autonomous systems coordinating logistics, forecasting demand, and managing real-time workflows.
The cloud providers are essentially going to war to become the ultimate orchestration platforms.
And the prediction here is that traditional enterprise software companies will evolve entirely into AI operating systems rather than just traditional SaaS vendors. Optimization AI is predicted to become the largest economic multiplier in the tech ecosystem.
Finding efficiencies in complex systems that the human brain simply cannot compute fast enough.
It makes me think of the Dabbawallas in Mumbai.
Ah, yes. The lunchbox delivery system.
Right. For anyone who doesn't know, it is this incredibly precise, flawless logistics system where hundreds of thousands of lunchboxes are delivered daily across a chaotic city. No barcodes, no computers. Purely through optimized human coordination and coded
A
symbols.
marvel of persistent execution.
Exactly. Now, imagine applying that exact level of real-time dynamic optimization to the entire global supply chain. An AI anticipating a shortage of semiconductor chips in Taiwan, rerouting shipping containers in the Atlantic, and adjusting factory schedules in Germany, all simultaneously, before a human analyst even realizes there's a delay.
That is the promise of the execution layer.
But I want to ask you about the listener. For the person sitting at their desk right now, managing a team, running operations, how does their daily job realistically change in the next 24 months?
Let's be very clear about this.
Yep.
Standard repetitive operational work is going to vanish. The manual reconciliation of spreadsheets, the chasing down of procurement approvals, the standard data entry, the autonomous systems will absorb that entirely. The next phase of leadership belongs to those who evaluate AI as a long-term infrastructure strategy tied to organizational agility, not just an innovation initiative or a fun side project.
You need to become the person who defines the rules and governance for the agents.
Precisely.
Okay, let's take a step back and summarize the incredible ground we have covered today. We are completely out of the experimental Jugad phase of AI.
Yes, we are.
We have moved from clever chatbots to $200 billion infrastructure plays. We are looking at satellite compute partnerships, sovereign national defenses, and the reality of supply chains run by autonomous agents that require immutable audit logs to execute corporate finance.
The era of standalone models is over. The era of operational execution has begun.
Exactly.
And as we wrap up, I want to leave the listener with a final lingering question to really mull over.
Go for it.
We have spent this entire deep dive talking about AI taking over operational execution, procurement, logistics, right? We are building systems that are hyper-logical, flawlessly optimized, and infinitely persistent.
Right.
But business is not entirely a science. There is an art to it. If autonomous systems are constantly negotiating with other autonomous systems to buy goods, optimize supply chains, and sign legally binding contracts, what happens to human intuition in business?
Oh, that is a fascinating angle.
When the entire foundational layer of global commerce is run by highly predictable, perfectly efficient machines, does human error become our biggest liability? Or does human unpredictability, the willingness to take an illogical risk, to bet on a relationship rather than a spreadsheet, does that become our only remaining competitive advantage?
Because if the machines are perfectly logical, the only way to disrupt the market is to break the rules. That is a phenomenal question to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. To everyone listening, thank you for tuning in. Keep questioning the systems around you. Look past the interface to understand the infrastructure, and we will catch you next time.